Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. As you know, this is Katie Koestner, and I am delighted to have all of my listeners back and back and back and over and over and over to keep on this long, winding journey that is oftentimes hard, but oftentimes glorious. And I have a feeling today's podcast is going to be one of those sunshiny glory moments, which is why I wore sunshine on my shirt, because I was really excited about talking to Lindz. So let me just share a little bit about Lindz's background and bio. Lindz Amer makes queer stuff for kids. They are best known for their websites, Queer Kid Stuff, where they make LGBTQ plus edutainment for queer kids and their allies. They're also the author of Rainbow Parenting, Your Guide to Raising Queer Kids and Their Allies, and their debut picture book, Hooray for She, He, Z, and They. They write and consult for mainstream preschool television, including creating the first non-binary character in the Paw Patrol universe. How cool is that? They travel all over to schools and libraries throughout the country, probably internationally, to spread queer joy with their childhood stuffed teddy bears. So maybe we'll even get to meet Teddy the bear. I'm not sure. Is Teddy the bear's name?
Teddy is the bear's name. I think Teddy might be downstairs, but if we ever want to take a pause, and I can go grab them.
No worries. No worries. Well, for our listeners, this is such a different kind of podcast today, but it's so exciting because I just started talking with Lindz and we were thinking about how important it is to start thinking about childhood and the ways in which queer young people are affected differently by sexual violence. So we'll get there eventually, but let's talk about the glory of Lindz. Lindz, how did you come into this work? Where did you grow up? What's a little mini backstory for you?
I grew up in New York City. I grew up in downtown Manhattan. So really in the middle of everything. I was a big theater kid, queer neurodivergent weirdo who didn't know who I was at a young age. Grew up just performing and figuring myself out. I went to undergrad with a theater degree and I kind of fell into children's storytelling and theater for young audiences. And while I was doing that, I was kind of taking gender studies classes for the first time in queer theory. And I just thought oh, these are two spaces that I'm really, really interested in. Why can't they come together? And so I started kind of experimenting with that and looking in children's theater for existing stories that had queer and trans representation and found very little and worked on the shows that did exist, but really wanted more after that. And I went abroad. I did a graduate degree. I kind of came up with this weird idea to maybe that we could do a Mr. Rogers kind of web series where I talk to kids about LGBT things. And I kind of went with that idea. And when I came back to the States, I grabbed a couple of friends who could work a camera. And we shot a pilot with no script, with no real understanding of what we were doing, put it out into the world. And yeah, I ran the web series from 2016 through 2019. Took some years off, but now I'm kind of to do work in mainstream kids media, to publish some books, do a lot of inner healing and come out as trans and gender affirming surgery and all this stuff, kind of coming more into myself. And now I'm kind of coming back finally to the web series and relaunching it. It's been quite a journey and I'm glad to be here in this moment.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I guess maybe we could go back to a couple steps because...
Yeah, that was a very Cliff Notes version.
A lot. I'm thinking, some of the things you mentioned was you had to take some time for yourself, which is awesome. And sometimes that's really hard for any number of reasons when we're going through anything that's traumatic or trying to figure out how to navigate exactly who we are and what happened to us and where we want to go. So maybe that mini pause, what kinds of good stuff were you doing to navigate that and come up with your new path?
Oh my gosh, a lot of stuff. In the pandemic years, I was certainly going through my Saturn return. If we have any astrology folks in the house, that's just really a time of figuring out who I was and reckoning with things that I had really repressed and not wanted to come to the surface. And then they suddenly were banging on my door, right? While I was running the web series, I think a big part of this too, while I was running the web series is I went through just an enormous amount of online harassment. And this was kind of between 2016 and 2019. So really, I think we have a much better understanding of kind of how online harassment works nowadays. But
Mhm.
the first like month that queer kid stuff went out into the world, it got picked up by the Huffington Post and like started getting all of this like attention. And part of that attention was like a giant wave of neo-Nazis coming into my comment sections without like any kind of block lists or any kind of filters at all. I was very new to being a creator on the internet. And so it took, and then as I was running the web series, like it was just constant waves and waves of harassment, people making these horrible videos about me. And it was just really difficult. And I was young too.
Yeah, you were. I mean, let's just draw some parallels and differences too, Lindz. I think, I don't even know how much of my bio you know, but so I'm 18 when I'm on the cover of Time. And back then there was no social media. So the hate blasts I got were physical.
Yeah.
Like people would say on the walls, Katie's a slut bitch whore. And I would walk around in the present tense, which limited the scope a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking about when you have this deluge of, it could be anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And a fierce and torrential downpour of hate, right? I think there's probably different ways to navigate that because I just had to think about where it might pop up in my physical surrounding, not on a screen, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I can only also imagine like just everywhere you physically walked, you had to wonder who was an ally and who was a hater.
Yeah.
In any space you went into. Was your workspace a comfortable one? Like, was that a good, safe place to go where you felt respected and honored or not always? Did you feel like a puppet to them too? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there using stories and narratives to make money and,
Yeah.
you know, not being about the real cause. That's a lot of questions, but what are your thoughts on anything I just said?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very much an artist and I end up doing a lot of freelance and contract work and kind of like having day jobs. And I think I've had to negotiate a lot of like, okay, how am I showing up in this space as Lindz? How am I showing up in this space as like my online persona? How am I showing up just like at the job that pays my rent? How am I showing up in different spaces? And where can I protect myself in all those different spaces? And like also just like the queer issue of like, okay, how out am I in this space? And this was like when I was creating the web series initially, I was kind of like figuring out the early kind of stages of my gender journey. And I wasn't like out as non-binary to a ton of people. And I ended up coming out like through the web series. I wrote like an arc for myself of like coming out to my teddy bear. But like that was a really long process of figuring out how I could feel comfortable in online spaces out as a non-binary person. And so I think there's been a lot of just like negotiating, like the spaces that I'm walking through as a human, how am I safe in those spaces? But also like when I pick up my phone and like start scrolling through Instagram, am I going to see a notification of someone saying something really awful to me? And how am I going to kind of mitigate and manage how I'm kind of going through all of these spaces?
Yeah, it could easily get exhausting.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that minute by minute kind of deluge of harassment or hate speech and do good self-care?
Yeah, I mean, it was a learning process. And honestly, it still has been like so many years after the fact. I really think like now, I started in 2016, we're like 8 years after the fact. And like, I only really now feel like very comfortable in online spaces and like can look at my notifications and say like, oh, that person needs to heal. Like that person is like projecting stuff onto me. This comment is about them and is not about me. And it's taken really that full 8 years to get to that, and a lot of really good therapy to get to that place. And I think, yes, the therapy is a part of it, but I also think there was a point where I just really needed to say to myself, like, I gotta have a life. I gotta like make sure that I'm not just working. I'm not just doing this stuff. And I am, dating and I am taking care of myself and I'm doing things outside of work. Like I got married in 2021 and like made sure we moved out of New York. And that was a really big part of like our mental health, my mental health in particular, of like needing to be more in nature and less in like the intense kind of like rhythm and grind and financial stress. So there have been decisions that I've kind of made over the last 8 years that have really been driven by, okay, how can I continue to sustain my mental health while I'm doing this work, and making sure that I can do it in the long term, because I really believe in this work and I think it's really important. And I want to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so that I can continue to make the impact that I want to make.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. That's very encouraging. And I especially like when you are able to say, it's not about me, it's about them and they have the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's really hard, I think, for survivors or those dealing with disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to start to say, I believe in me.
Mm-hmm.
I know what happened to me. And if you can't handle the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can't handle it, then that's on you, not on me.
Yeah.
To me, magical now is with the good parts of the World Wide Web, we're able to find communities
Mm-hmm.
and peers and support for each of us. I think it's better than it definitely ever was.
Yeah.
It's not everywhere, but at least it's somewhere, right? At
Mm-hmm.
least it's some. So let's talk about some of the great stuff you're doing with children's works and writing, and how have those books been received, and web series as well. Like, what were some glorious moments for you?
Oh my gosh. So last year, the first book came out, the parenting book came out end of May. And so it's been out in the world for about a little bit over a year now. And I did a big kind of like tour throughout the States when that book came out. It was just really incredible to connect with people in person. I mean, I've done that over the years through schools and library visits and community center kind of performances that I do. I do these like live performances of the material from my web series. But it was really amazing to kind of cultivate the voice. It's so natural for me to talk to kids, right? And like to sing and like talk about these like pronouns and gender and the LGBTs like for young people. But it was kind of a shift in tone for me to figure out how to talk about like why it was important for an adult audience. And I kind of like started to poke at like how to do that when I gave a TED Talk in 2019. And that's kind of actually where the book came from, that the idea from that TED Talk, and just like, okay, how can we expand this into like a parenting, child raising philosophy? And just like being able to connect and have those conversations with grownups about like, okay, this is important. This isn't necessarily a thing that like we were raised with. Like I wrote the book because it's what I wished my parents had when they were raising me. And so getting off the page and just like having these face-to-face conversations with people, a lot of like straight cisgender parents who are raising kids who are coming out as trans and non-binary, and they want to be like so supportive and validating, but just having no idea how to go about it, because that's just not how we were raised. That's not how society tells us to raise children. And so really helping people and guiding people along that journey has been really fulfilling.
Yeah. Give us some examples of things that you're giving out to parents to say. Like, what are some of the best tips? Because no doubt there's two things that will come of that. Some of our listeners who exactly are walking, a close path to yours are going to love hearing you say them.
Mm-hmm.
And then some will have, if they're not, they might be parents and they'll love hearing those too. So what are a couple of your favorites?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the first thing that I kind of try and talk about is like, there's a lot of mindset obstacles really to parents and caregivers and family members really raising kids in a gender and queer affirming way. I think a lot of that block, that like obstacle that people have in their heads is just like, I don't want to do something wrong. And the thing that I always say is that it's okay to make mistakes. Like we are all humans. Parents are humans. Like you're not expected to ever be a perfect parent. We can only try. And if we fail or we make a mistake, we can learn from it and we can do better. Because really right now, like where, anti-LGBT legislation is, where all this misinformation around gender and queerness and kids is right now, the bar is just like so low that if you're even doing like one thing, you're doing better than most people. So it's really just like about trying. And then kind of like the next step that I like to talk about is like, okay, how do we actually start to approach a lot of these topics with young people? And the thing that I always tell people is come at it from under the doorknob. And this is a phrase that I kind of came to from a college professor of mine. It was one of my first teachers who talked to me about writing for children, writing plays, writing any kind of storytelling for children. And it's really about like not dumbing things down, but simplifying and getting to a point where you can like look up at the world through a child's eyes, through a child's perspective. I don't know. I always kind of do a little experiment. Have you ever been to a place, like returned to a space that you had been in as a child? Like whether that was like a preschool or a place where a community center, your childhood home. Have you ever returned to a space where you had been as a child?
Physically?
Yeah, physically.
Gone. Sure.
Yeah. So like, what are like some things that you noticed like when you came back into that space as an adult?
It's smaller than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Smaller than you thought? Mm-hmm.
Right. Everything's bigger when you're little.
Exactly.
Right. I think that's the number one thing. Or that, it's older now. Something's changed.
Absolutely.
Life moves on.
Absolutely.
And then you can always, I think, too, Lindz, you can almost physically be there through the smells and the sounds. Something will immediately, resonate with, what happened there.
Exactly. So like some things may be out of reach that weren't out of reach before because they're lower to the ground and like our adult bodies can't easily get to the ground as much.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I try to get people to like in that mindset of like, okay, like spaces and things feel different to children than they do as we're adults. And we can talk about like approaching a topic like gender and pronouns in the same way because kids just like don't have the same amount of life experience as adults. So they're not coming to these topics with all of that like baggage on their backs. So when I'm talking about like getting down to a child's level, venturing under the doorknob, we're talking about like taking off that big old backpack and approaching it like a child is learning about gender and these new words for the very first time. And they don't have that negative or positive experience with their own gender walking through the world. So we can really approach it like without all that stuff. It's so much easier than you think it is to approach any of these topics. So those are kind of like the two things, like the mindset, like it's okay to make mistakes. And like, let's like just like simplify and come at it from like a blank slate, like a new lens. So yeah.
I love that, Lindz. I love that. And I'm also thinking about some of our recent interviews on the podcast. And I was talking with a woman yesterday for another episode and her issue or her child experience starting around middle school when she was quickly developing into the image that lots of people have of the cute girl, right? The Barbie doll. It turned into everyone around her navigated her with that one singular identity. I was so imprinted by how magnified that was based on what little kids have been taught and what they've seen. And I feel like what you're doing, it's going to help that unbinding of like narrow boxes to fit things in and creating a larger worldview, I think is such a solution to lots of problems.
Yeah.
Like it becomes harder to be biased if there's no ranking or assigning of much. Like, why can't we start to think like that? Good and bad and evil. I don't know. But I like it. So some examples I imagine is just, I think the characters that you're creating, like, how do you choose? How do you decide, are all the characters non-binary? Are there any pronouns that you use? When you say that rabbit, she, that dog, he, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So on the web series, it's really me and my stuffed teddy bear. So I use they, them pronouns. That wasn't true for the full web series. I was kind of talking about this earlier of like, I used she, her pronouns when I started the web series. And then there's a point kind of in one of the later seasons where I write this like 3-episode arc where I come out to my bear as non-binary. I will say coming out to your like stuffed teddy bear that your friend is puppeting is a real trip. It was fun though. And then started using they, them pronouns with everybody in my life. When I was growing up, Teddy is my like actual childhood bear. So Teddy is like also in their 30s. Teddy's had a life. But Teddy always had he, him pronouns when I was a child. And then when I went into the web series, I was like, oh, like back then when I was using she, her pronouns, I was like, oh, I need like non-binary representation on the show. Why don't I give Teddy they, them pronouns? And I had such a hard time keeping it straight for myself because like that's never how Teddy was to me. And then now Teddy uses he and they pronouns. So I'm kind of modeling for children that Teddy uses multiple pronouns and might use he on one day or they on another day. And that's how a lot of people work too. A lot of people might use different multiple pronouns. And then like in terms of other characters that I've written, I really try and write a lot of non-binary characters, honestly. And I usually get asked to write non-binary characters. There aren't a ton of other trans non-binary people in the kids writing world. At least in TV film, there's quite a lot now in picture book writing. I do have a song that I wrote about my dog, and it's this like cute little chant that I wrote about my gender fluid dog. In each verse, I use a different pronoun for my dog. And that's actually true. We do kind of like use different pronouns for our dog just because sometimes she seems like a he and sometimes she seems like a she. But yeah, I don't think I ever like go in to a character and writing a character with any kind of like, I have to use this kind of pronoun. But it's really just like about writing good characters and like good character development. And that's just kind of storytelling 101. And for me, it's just about, showing kids like the diversity that's possible and like showing possibility models for them and doing that through storytelling and doing that through character. Because I really think that storytelling is the way that we learn how the world functions, how we can be, especially for kids and for educational content. There's just so much that's really informative about the stories that we encounter as young people. And so I want to show young kids and reflect the world that's actually around them. And I mean, I'm also a preschool music teacher, so I have gender nonconforming kids in all of my classes. and that's not even have anything to do with me. Those are just like the schools that I'm in, just kind of by happenstance. So I think showing kids like a show with characters that use lots of different pronouns and express themselves in lots of different ways is really just like a reflection of their reality.
That's fantastic. And Lindz, talk to us about the teaching of consent. I know you had done this and created a way to teach young children about consent. What did that look like and how does it work and how did you come up with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like and I did like a series of episodes on kind of like early childhood sex education in the original Queer Kid Stuff web series. And that's something that has always been really important to me. I was writing and producing the web series kind of in the middle of Me Too, just really having that big upswing. I think it was like 2017, 2018. And I wanted to write about it. I wanted to approach it in a way that made sense for young people because kids, even if you're not like directly talking to a child about a specific topic, like it's in the world around them. Like they're absorbing the conversations that adults are having around them about these topics. Like it seeps in. And I take a lot of inspiration from Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. And I think often about, there's this very famous photo of him and the character on his show called Officer Clemens, who's the police officer played by Francois Clemens, who is a Black queer performer. And they take a foot bath together. And this was in the middle of Jim Crow era laws where Black folks and white folks weren't allowed to be in the same pools, community pools as each other. And so it was a really radical act for Fred Rogers to take a foot bath with his Black neighborhood police officer. And that was just like a really brilliant way to take this really big racial justice topic and make it super accessible for kids, but also like make a big political statement. And so I look at that as like really a model for figuring out like, okay, how can I take this big topic and make it something that's really accessible and practical for young people? And so for me, when Harvey Weinstein was happening and this big movement was really coming out of the woodwork, I wanted to do an episode on consent. So I had my songwriter at the time, I had her write a song about consent. Yes and no, and maybe means no as well sometimes. And we need to like respect other people and what they're saying to us. And I did a whole episode on that and then did a couple of series episodes on kind of like, how do we talk about our bodies? What's a trans inclusive way to answer the what makes a baby question? And kind of other things along those lines, because I really...
All right, wait, that was like too much good stuff. Lindz, hold on. Let's go back to, you caught me at the, like, how do we make a baby question?
Oh, yeah.
What was the one before that?
The consent episode with the song in it. Yeah. What makes a baby? Trans inclusive body talk.
Let's talk about how do we answer who makes a baby?
Yeah. I mean, we can back up for a second and kind of talk a little bit about, there's this like big kind of misconception that I think is really prevalent now and has existed around, okay, when we talk to kids about the LGBTs, when we talk to kids about sexuality, that we have to talk to them about sex. And the thing that I always kind of say to combat that is that like, those are two separate conversations. Because if we're equating our identity, our sexual orientation, our sexuality as like just being like the ways in which we have sex, we're taking just like a small sliver of like our identity, right? Of like the queer community as a whole. There's so much more to that than just like sexual intercourse and the way that we think about sex and sexuality amongst grownups. And so there's that part of it. Of like, these are two separate conversations that are both very important, but we can approach in very different ways. And then it's also like answering the question that the child is actually asking. When a kid is asking, where do babies come from? They're not asking about like intercourse, sex. They're asking about like, okay, what is like the mechanism for making humans, right? And the way to actually answer that question is actually pretty scientific. It takes a uterus, it takes an egg, and it takes sperm. And those could be coming from any combination of people with whatever kind of gender identity that they have. Like a trans woman can make sperm. A trans man can have eggs and become pregnant. There are so many different ways that families can form and babies can be made through just different combinations of those essentially three ingredients, right? And it's really like, okay, how can we frame that conversation? And in that episode that I created, I featured a book called What Makes a Baby. It's by Corey Silverberg with illustrations by Fiona Smythe. And it is fantastic. It's just like, it's super trans inclusive. It really takes a look at like the science behind it and those kind of three ingredients that I'm outlining. And it just is so simple. And it's just a beautiful book. Highly recommend.
Yeah. Lindz, again, going back to some of our listenership and what they're probably listening for in our conversation, I'm thinking a lot of what you're teaching and instructing is going to be so helpful to undoing all the rape myths that are out there. It's if she's asking for it, we're still using she and what asking for what and what body part and what act, who and power and control. It's almost like when we have more importantly thoughtful conversations with young children, we can start to raise a generation that doesn't just buy into all of the stereotypes out there, regardless of what they are. There are, plenty that are harmful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that I touch on in my book quite a bit and that I was talking to you about is this idea that early childhood sex education is actually abuse prevention. Because if we're talking about and giving children the language of this is what this body part is called, this is the word that we use for it, instead of saying private parts or coming up with a colloquialism, right? Then when we teach them, okay, this is a body part and nobody touches this body part except for you. If we can teach them that and we can teach them those lessons around consent, really that's all that is, consent, right? It's about giving language to a body part and it's about saying this is for you, not for anybody else. If anybody ever touches this part of your body, you tell me your adult who is a trusted adult. Then it's going to be so much more difficult for someone who is going to try and prey on a child to be able to do that successfully, because that child is going to know going into that situation, hey, you're not supposed to be touching me there. That's not okay.
What about this question then, Lindz? I agree 100%. How about, do you think we can do away with the shame around the body part?
Yes, absolutely.
What I'm trying to go for is we can say, please talk to me, but I feel still there's like, oh my gosh, that body part versus that body part versus there's good ones, there's bad ones. It's still important to be, I don't know that we're going to get to a point where we say, your eyebrow is different. How do we explain? Why do we wear clothes? Which ones do we cover up? I think that it's really, I'm sure you've wrestled with all of these questions, but where I was headed is I think it's lovely to get the kids being able to use the terminology, but I just worry that we're not getting rid of the shame or embarrassment attached with some of them so that they won't feel embarrassed. Even if we say, please come to us, we also have to get rid of any sense of like, there's something wrong with you, right? Or this is embarrassing. And maybe you've already struggled or thought about, or maybe some part of what you're working on is addressing shame. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really about like talking about body parts with neutrality, right? It's like, okay, like this is your elbow, this is your shoulder, this is your nose, this is a vulva. Like, these are just body parts. It's just language. It's just the words that we use for that part of our body. And really talking about like, okay, what is, and like, this is a separate conversation, is like private versus public. Like, these are body parts that are private. These are body parts that are ours and they are for us. And we can make decisions about whether or not someone can touch that body part. And that's not about shame. That's about like, okay, this is who I am sharing this part of my body with and how I am allowing it to be shared. And it's really interesting because as someone who's like also studied internationally, kind of like in theater for young audiences and in kind of different spaces around like the rest of the world is thinking about gender and sexuality, Europe especially is like way far ahead of us in terms of like how we can talk to children about bodies and normalizing kind of like just like nudity and like what pregnant bodies look like for children. There's this TV show in Denmark, I think. It's an animated show, and it's about this man who has a really long penis. And like he just like gets into, it's like a slapstick show. It's like a comedy. And that show would never air in the United States. But like, that's what I'm talking about, of like, that's a pretty like neutral way of like looking at a body part and like making it kind of like a funny like punchline, right, in a children's show. I think we have a long way to go in the United States before we get to a show about a wayward penis.
30 more years to go. I'm not sure. But I mean, I guess it will eventually. I mean, a lot has changed in Europe. Like, you were born when I was on the cover of Time practically. So I would definitely say things are changing. They have changed a ton. I mean, definitely. But they're also so polarized as well.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Denmark because I do feel like the stigma is different. I'm curious if there's any other interesting examples, because I just was in Kenya, working in Kenya on like trafficked girls and just sexual abuse in general. You know, every country is so different.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the privilege of just having resources. I'll say as simple as water and shelter.
Yeah.
How we can change, which I know is a little off topic, but I'm just thinking about how do we, you know, in the bigger space, what I am enjoying so much is listening. I just tell you kind of where for our listeners too, you know, when we started the conversation and you described your journey, college, queer studies, but then what I liked is you were such a brilliant thinker. You took some things that you loved from childhood, and then you took your studies and you found a way to create something brand new and beautiful with them that was, you know, synthesized, and you carved out a space for your creative mind. That must have been hard. I guess I wanted to go back because some of our listeners are trying to figure out how to take their different parts of themselves, kind of and a part isn't necessarily always an identity. It could be an experience. So how do we take all the different parts and navigate into a good space or a malleable space? And you continue to morph and change, which I think you're also fabulous at that. You're like flexible as heck. And I think that's also, I want to honor that part of you because your story is teaching us, I think as listeners who don't know your work, about how it is possible to do all the things you've done, which are just, I'm enamored. I think it's amazing. And I would only, again, say, like, I like thinking about, with my awesome guests, I like thinking about where did you go and how did you navigate that? And I pivoted, Lindz, the whole thing. Like, I was a chemical engineer, Japanese double major.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Teaching, like, that was what I thought I wanted to do. And then I had an experience. I completely had to change my whole focus. But I was like you, I admire, like, I think one of the things that helped me was being able to just give up on boxes, like just give up on checklists and think about, like, what do I really find that I'm passionate about? And I think there were a few experiences in my growing up that were enormous enough and expansive enough that helped me think big. And I didn't grow up in New York City like you, but I grew up in Cow Valley, Lindz. It was pretty pathetic. We had we had cow tipping as a sport, Lindz.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was what it was. You know, some people, I'm not poo-pooing cows nor farmers, but nor shotguns. We had plenty of those. But I think what I like reflecting on is just what you've shared so far and how creative you are. And I also think it's fabulous that you take source material from lots of different places and then you find ways to utilize it in creating your own craft. That's fantastic. So thank you for sharing all that so far.
Yeah. Well, it's nice for us to be reflected. We've only been talking for a little long, but it's
late. Or not maybe. I was thinking next, maybe we could talk about anything, you know, you mentioned, well, I don't know if it'll stay on the podcast, but Hillary, your wife, and how has we talk a little bit about relationships and also, you know, what sustains us and supports us when we're going through difficult times. And, you know, I don't know when, you said you got married in 22, right?
2021.
Oh, 21. Yeah. So when did you meet your partner and was that part of that little respite when you stepped back? Remember you said that you wanted to take self-care, make sure you were dating and like, how did that play a role in helping you feel? Was that scary? Was that good? You know, I'm not trying to pry into your private life, but I think
it's good.
Relationships can be really either part of the thing that helps us grow or they can be really hurtful and painful and dark. So I don't know. I'm curious, like how you feel about relationships.
Yeah. I mean, it's been so important. Hillary and I are coming on 7 years together in August, and we've just celebrated our 3rd marriage anniversary, which is exciting. Yeah, we've been through a lot together. I mean, we're both
not even being together and going through a lot can be one of the most powerful ways to bond.
Yeah, and like we've both
on the same team.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as we stay on the same team.
Yeah, whenever we like get in, like, you know, get into our heads or get into an argument or anything like that, like I always just kind of try and come back to like, hey, we're on the same team. Like, I am here to help you problem solve. I am here to help you regulate yourself. I am here to like take you out of this moment where you're having a hard time. Like, I am here for you. And that to me is like what our relationship is. It's like at the end of the day, like you're the person that I'm coming home to. And yeah, we've been through a lot together and we've really watched each other grow so much. I mean, I like in the pandemic was like starting to understand like that I'm neurodivergent and that my brain just like works in all these different ways that like maybe the world isn't like built for. And she is also neurodivergent. So we've had to kind of like navigate like, okay, what are systems that work for you? What are systems that work for me? And as I'm learning about myself, she's learning about herself and like vice versa. And we both have our own survivor stories. And so we've kind of worked through that in the past. And there's just so much that it takes to really interlock your life with someone else. And we have 2 dogs together. And so we're, you know, we share a car, like all these like small logistical things that it takes to like build a life together. And it's pretty amazing what we've been able to accomplish just like as 2 people in one relationship. And there's so much more that we want to accomplish. But then there's always those days where we're like, oh, like nothing is working. Like our communication sucks. Like I'm not regulating well, like all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not about that one day and like how we were feeling that one time. It's about the longevity of the thing. And, you know, I'm such an introvert, but maybe that's not like this side of my persona necessarily. But at the end of the day, I just want to like lie on the couch and, you know, rewatch Friends and cuddle with some ice cream. And that's kind of like where I recharge and I can show up in other spaces as this person who is a professional and who can talk about all these things and has expertise. But like at the end of the day, I don't have to be all of those things with this person in my life.
That's fantastic balance. It sounds like, and really healthy. I think you just
we try.
Yeah, nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
But I like some of the things you said, which is, you know your comfy spot on the sofa with the ice cream and friends, and she respects that that's your comfy spot. And you have the language. I like that you also use the language like this is a tough day. I think acknowledgement of someone's emotional state or where they are is just so affirming itself.
Yeah.
And not everybody goes up with that language. And even though if you did, but you certainly
My
use
parents
it.
divorced at a young age, so.
So it's all your own creation and learning, I guess, which is really also a testament to how strong you are, Lindz. It's incredible.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, it's really amazing. I think you're such a pioneer of good things in the world. So, well, let's talk about so what's next? I mean, there's a long list of to-dos on
always.
right? Like there's so many things. And I guess here's where I head then. You have this creative space where you are able to affect change, right? And it's positive and has been helpful. And then around the whole planet, there's all these bad, awful, negative, tragic, politically inept things happening.
Yeah.
So how do you stay present in what you can control? And how do you think about what's all that other noise out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's taken me a long time to really be comfortable with the fact that, like, I am one person. I cannot necessarily change the world, but, like, I can help someone. I can make an impact on someone's life. And I think understand the power of, like, what my kind of, like, genius is. And I know what I am capable of giving to the world, while I also just like am a person who is living in the system as a trans non-binary person, and I have to do things to survive, right? And so it's a lot of juggling all of that of like, okay, where is my energy level right now? How can I create something that is going to help someone? How can I pay my mortgage this month? And like, how can I balance that living within these oppressive systems? And I think for a long time when I was younger, I tried to take on so much of the world and so much of what was happening. And it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my mental health. It wasn't good for like me being able to create things that would help other people. And I think ultimately what I kind of discovered about like the work that I do is that I kind of create, I think, the most impact when I'm also healing a part of myself. And I don't know like how conscious that always is for me, but like a lot of creating queer kid stuff was like, this is the show that I wish that I had when I was a kid. And so like, this is me giving a gift to my inner child. And how can I nurture and heal and hold the hand of that inner child for myself while I'm doing that? And again, writing the parenting book of like, okay, this is the handbook that I wish that my parents had when they were raising me so that they could support and validate me as I was kind of trying to figure out who I was and gender identity and all this stuff. And the picture book is really like, again, to like little Lindz, that's who I dedicated the picture book to. And now I'm kind of moving into a space that's a little bit different of like, we're trying to have our own children and like, okay, what do I want to create for the kids that I want to bring into this world? And how do I create something for the young person who is going through the process of like figuring out their gender identity and like is coming up against this world that is so hard right now? Like, what does that kid need? And how can I talk to those parents and how can I talk to those young people and be a part of their lives, whether I'm personally as like a conscious person present there, or if I'm like this like screen persona. And that kind of parasocial relationship is very interesting to me, especially with a young person. But yeah, it's complicated, right? It's really complicated.
It is. And I just was thinking as you were talking to another parallel for our listeners, we'll talk a lot about like, I know what I went through as a survivor, and I don't want my child, we were just talking about like wanting to have kids, I don't want my child to face the same. And then you have all these parents who I think are not parenting. They're parenting as too protective. They're also parenting perhaps all the wrong things, like including perhaps shame or a million things. And I know we talk a lot about that too, but I think one thing I want our listeners to think about, if you are a parent or thinking about being one, what Lindz just asked is, what kind of kid do I want to have? You know, what kind of experience do I want my child to have? And I would tell this story to you, Lindz. Like one of the things I tell when I do my parent talks, I'll say, you know, my dad was an FBI agent and super strict and protective. Like he was armed at all times, literally. right? So if my boyfriend comes to get me in high school and knocks on the door, he's there with a pistol, pretty much. Like, and the gun collection, the like dead animals on the wall, it's all there. And the rules were so strict in a way that I tell parents, you will not raise a strong child if you do everything for them and don't let them take some risks, learn how to navigate on their own. As long as possible, the younger you can allow your child to start exploration and understanding within reason.
Yeah,
You know, you don't have to don't put them on an iceberg and say good luck.
Safety first.
Like maybe they should learn how to swim first and maybe, you know, have a life or whatever, you know, but I'm just saying like within reason, I think there's some value in exposing your children to as many possible scenarios and people and countries and cultures. Like to me, that's the joy and beauty of everything is like, and I don't know. I hope I get to meet your kids someday. Hillary, well, me, I hope. But anyway, I am like, I'm thinking, what else should we talk about? We gave our listeners a lot. Is there anything else you would, you know, like to say to survivors that you mentioned just for a second about your own survivorship, but we don't have to talk about it. But, you know, what else would you like to share, especially since a lot of our listeners are survivors? And many may, you know, identify as queer, non-binary, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, Lindz, you'll find this, and I think our listeners would too. Interesting. We do on the Take Back the Night website, we have an intake form where people can share their story and to come on the podcast. Like there's a lot of, you know, the Take Back the Night Foundation has lots of different forums, and we try and be as inclusive as possible with identities. And I think America would be shocked to see like there's almost no cis hetero people filling out forms anymore.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Fantastic. Like I don't know. I want like say that you can't be heterosexual anymore. Like who for you? But I'm just saying like, I think most people who only see a tiny slice of life would be shocked at how many people are, I don't know what, you know, we're a pretty safe place to disclose a take night. But I think I just want to say, like, I think the work you're doing is imperatively needed, and people would be shocked at how many different identities there are. And I also like how you said, you know, you'll change up the pronoun from week to week. You know, I think people are like, that sounds exhausting. Like, but I'm like, tough for you.
Yeah. I mean, like, especially working with young kids, like they learn through play, they learn through experimentation, they learn through creativity. And like, that's all it is. Like, I really talk about like, okay, like, how can we ask kids, what are your pronouns today? And that word today is so key because like it allows for that creativity. It allows for experimentation because like, how are we supposed to know how a word is going to make us feel if we haven't heard someone use it for us yet? And I mean, there's a reason why when we go to a clothing store, we go to a fitting room, right? And try on that pair of pants before we like, you know, okay, maybe I need to size up. Maybe I need to size down. Maybe I need a different cut, right? Like, why can't we use that with the language we use for our identities and like how we express ourselves in the world? Yeah, right?
I love it. Well, like any last tips for our survivors?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's just like take care of yourself. I think for me, and like kind of not like going too deep into my survivor story or anything like that, but so much of it was just like me expressing my confusion and like putting myself in unsafe situations because I didn't know who I was and I didn't know how I fit into the world and I was really depressed. It was almost a form of self-harm. And I needed a little bit of a kick in the pants to like get my crap together. And like, I also needed a way out, right? Like I needed a way out of the situation that I was in. I needed a way out of like this like adolescent space where I just like felt so boxed in by people's expectations of me. And I needed to get out and like figure my stuff out and like get my mental health together and take care of myself and like really give myself the space to like ask myself those questions. And it's been such a long road for me to just like really understand myself. Like I'm sitting here at 32 and like now I've had gender affirming surgery. I am using the pronouns that like feel good to me. I'm wearing clothes and expressing myself in a way that like feels like aligned with who I am. And now I'm at like such a point where like I can really like be myself in a very public way. But it's taken me a really long time. Like I didn't have top surgery until I was 30 years old. And that's like the best decision I have ever made for myself. But it was a really scary thing to go through.
Hillary, there, you had a partner at least to be with you, right?
Yeah. During my surgery, she was incredibly supportive during all of that. So that was really important. But yeah, it's been a long road. And like I've needed to have a little bit of patience with myself as I've kind of like, new things have clicked in and I've made new discoveries about myself and like felt more comfortable being out in the world as like this side of myself and this side of myself. And then understanding it all and integrating it all. And then like finally being like, okay, this is who I am. And I'm still working on being open to like, maybe there are new ways that I can continue to discover myself and letting that be like a part of my lifelong journey of like, what is this like coming of age narrative? Like, why does that arc have to end at any certain age? Because I know queer people who come out in like their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even. And I think that that's beautiful. And I feel sad for them and like, not being able to live as your authentic self for that long. But I also like am so celebratory of like, yes, like you've come to this like space in your life where you can be your authentic self. Like that's incredible. And it takes a lot of strength to get there. I don't know if you know anything about tarot, but I'm a big astrology and tarot person. I'm like tarot cards. There's this one card. It's called the Three of Swords. And in my deck, it's a heart that has three swords that are stabbing it in the middle. It's a kind of a dark card. It's a card about heartbreak. And I got that card when I got my top surgery. It was like the card that I drew maybe the day or two before. And I found that very literal because my chest was literally being cut open, right? And I had to go through this really hard, very painful thing. But ultimately, it's the best thing I've ever done for myself in my life. And I had to go through a moment that was like scary and painful. And like I had drains coming out of my body. Like it's not like a pretty experience, right? But and I have scars from it, right? Like that's kind of how it works. But it's also something that's turned into something so beautiful that like I had to push through what was really, really difficult and really hard to be able to get to a place where like I am so much better off. And I don't know what the moral of the story is there, but I hope that resonated.
It's a good story. I think it gives a lot of courage and hope. And I'm going to have to get a tarot deck, I think.
Yeah, you should. It's fun.
Yeah. I have a book called The Birthday Book. And there's two of them. One's called the Relationship Book and one's called the Birthday Book. And it takes every sign every day. Birthday Book has this awesome amount of information, including, I think, the tarot's in there about like your weather. Like I swear by it.
Yeah.
The Relationship Book pairs up it's only by two people, like how you might match up with one other person with a different. So if you haven't checked out those, you might like them a lot.
I think I've heard of them. They're ringing a bell. But yeah, I mean, these are systems and oh, they're the small ones. Yeah. I mean,
they're like massive books. They're like,
oh wow, that was how thick they are. Oh my gosh.
No, they're like this. They're like this. They're massive. Like you could lift weights with them.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, these are systems of like interpretation and like ways of understanding the world that have existed for centuries. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in them for sure.
I agree. So we end on that. That is fun. And maybe everyone will also take a chance on, reading into it. I think it's interesting. It just is a different way of thinking, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, Lindz, you are absolutely amazing and inspiring in all of the work you're doing. I hope our listeners will somehow find their way to support you.
Yeah.
Applaud you, message you, or just say good things and read your book, especially if they're going to be a parent or are one already.
Yeah.
And then anything else you want to close with today?
Just if people want to find me on the internet, you can find me at MixLindz, MXLINDZ on Instagram and TikTok. Also, my web series called Queer Kid Stuff. I'm currently trying to relaunch it, so you can find that Kickstarter campaign. It ends on July 5th, so I don't know when this episode's going to come out. But
okay, that's great.
And yeah, I hope I can see some folks on the internet. That'd be fun.
Yeah, well, definitely. And again, for our listeners, please always do wonderful, good self-care. take time to regroup. I always say, if it's one day at a time. It's a long journey. It's not always linear, and you are never alone in the healing process. So reach out at any time. And on our website, on the podcast, we're opening a Katie Collective store, and we're going to put Lindz's books in there if you want to get a hold of them with links to purchase them. So be sure to check that out as well. So everyone, take care, and we will see you on another episode.